and history of the military. My husband is a 30-year veteran, and our son being missing, and of course living in Europe for most of my life, to be honest. But I was born at White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico, where they launch all kinds of missiles, including not only missiles, but the high altitude balloons, the high altitude, high pressure balloons from that area. And so I was really, just by my family history and my dad working on missiles, and that had this history of knowledge from that area. And so when I would start reading about
real quick, Patricia, I'm really sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to let you know, I went ahead and started my stream, so we are streaming now, if that's okay with you, because I kind of thought that you would rather have this streamed out. Is that correct?
That's great. That's great.
Okay, great. So just so
Because
you
I
know,
was
you are streaming now.
I was like,
right.
yeah, nothing is
I
running.
hate
She
to
was like,
interrupt
okay, well,
you,
I'll just
but
go.
so yeah, please continue if you can pick back up from where
Should
you
I
are.
repeat
Before
the introduction about
before you go on and the point gets lost, what pictures did you take that made you say the moon wasn't solid?
just a picture of the moon?
But
I
what did you
just
see in it?
a
I think I
good,
have.
really good camera, and I zoomed in, and I took more, and I took more, and I went, the moon is not solid. It's not solid. No matter what anyone says to me, the moon is not solid. And it explains so much now. And of course, you just don't stop there. You just don't see a picture, especially when you're a homeschool mom, and you're in homeschool groups and everybody has questions about everything. You always have to be ready with an answer, right? So you're years of training to investigate. That's the one positive thing about becoming a homeschool parent, is that you get used to investigating and being ready for an answer of what you think is what, right? So this is definitely my opinion, but I think there is hard evidence, circumstantial evidence, and irregularities that prove that the Earth is not solid. And but this topic that I want to talk about is the gay versus evolution. The gay being the great astronomical year versus the theory of evolution.
Yeah. Once I came to that realization, I started noticing all the ways they were using to insert years and longevity into historicity and stuff. And you're like, oh, 10,000 here, carbon dating there. I'm like, what do you? It's almost like you need a billion-year span to make nonsense happen or something. Or whatever.
Right. And to divert and to confuse, and so then you're busy with trying to think about the millions and billions of years. Right now, it's up to 4.3 billion years, I believe. They think that when the big boom happened, and so I think that we have enough evidence, as and I hate to use, my husband likes to use true earthers, as true earthers, and hard evidence, circumstantial evidence, and irregularities to say, no way is our world that old. So,
Yep.
Does anyone have any questions? No? Okay. So, the first thing that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention are icons, and normally when people think of icons, they think of religious icons, right? Because we like to put our beliefs into drawings. And, evolutionists are no different. They used their beliefs, because it absolutely is a belief system, to create icons. And one of the most famous icons, and maybe Shane can put it up if he's ready, is the monkey to man icon chart. And, you know, when I was talking to my grandmother when she was still alive, and I asked her if she believed in evolution, and she said yes. And I said, well, why do you believe in evolution, Oma? I called her Oma, and she said, because there was a chart on the wall in my classroom, and it was showing the monkey to the man. And now they even do it to like the fish to the man or whatever. And because of this icon, you know, just looking at it, it makes people think it's real. And, you know, of course, it would need, well, they're saying about 200,000 years to bring monkey to a man, right? So, and, you know, some people would argue it would need more time than that with all of the different evolutionary stages and stuff that would have to change. You know, you can even say 6.8 million years ago, you know, they'll use all of that, but you know, let's go with the shortest amount of time. And that would be the shortest that they can even bring people to think about in science is 200,000 years. So does anybody have any knowledge on that they can offer?
200,000 still seems very large to me.
Yes.
Well,
I'm
I will give
replying to
credit.
his posts in the chat. So
I
Oh,
will give
okay.
credit to a documentary I saw about a year ago, and it was just a very cheaply produced, just one guy with a microphone who confronted mainstream academia with a fairly simple question about evolution in general. He said, "Okay, you're always talking about how one species, we all come from this single cell, and then it came out another species came from that, and then we came from those species. But where can you show me in the fossil record evidence of one species changing into another species?" And the best that they could provide were, you know, all these, well, down at this such and such island, we've got this kind of bird and it changes, you know, the beak changes a little bit of shape, or it's got a new kind of feather, or, you know, he says, okay, but that's still a bird. That's still the same kind of bird. That still has, you know, the same body and everything. What about something changing into a dog from a bird? If you got anything like that, none of them could answer that question.
Yeah, but they're trying to force it to happen, aren't they? They're trying to force it with their breeding and all you know, the scientists are trying to force it, but even that doesn't work, you know. They try to just create, what do you call it, when you take a goat and you make that exact goat a clone. They try to even do clones, and the clones even have problems, you know. So yeah, it's the fossil record absolutely does not show any kind of evidence, hard evidence, circumstantial evidence, irregularities that prove that there is a change from you know, a monkey into some kind of in-between stage, monkey man stage, and then a man. So the focus that I'm trying to make on this is the amount of time, because time is not on their side, right? Time is not on their side. And, you know, that is a very simple way to debunk the whole theory of evolution and the damage that the theory of evolution has done to science, to relationships, to, you know, the whole academic world. So, you know, because even though it's a theory, they treat it as fact. And if you want to question that with some hard facts, then you're a nutcase. And absolutely, in my experience, and maybe your experiences are different, that was always the case. You know, you cannot question evolution. So does anybody have similar experiences?
No, not that you couldn't question, but that you didn't have any reason to, and everything was steered to specifically not do that. I didn't even feel the slightest hint of a need to question evolution, right? I was like, oh, it's in a book? Yeah, that's as valid as everything else I know, right? Like,
Exactly. And that the world is a globe that was presented to us also. And, we didn't even feel, I didn't ever feel the need to question if the world was flat or a globe. If, flat, that's absurd. If it's a plane or foundation, if it's an immovable foundation, that would be absurd to even suggest that. That outer space doesn't exist, that would be absurd to, you didn't even think about questioning it. But evolution, I think, has had challenges because it is just as absurd as the world being a globe and we having outer space and all these other planets and everything. And I think the real key to debunking all of that is time itself. And so that was really why I wanted to come on and present this, because when you look at the time, there's another, and I don't know if Shane could put it up, but it is Haeckel's embryo drawings, and which kind of shows, like they're, we're all kind of alike. It shows a common path. Like we all come from one embryo and we're just changed slightly. Well, this drawing has been totally tampered with. And even the scientists can't even, let's see why. I'm having so many problems going there. And that is the thing about NASA or with evolution. They have to tamper with even the icons, even their evidence is tampered with. It's not, so time is not on their side, and even the evidence has to be manufactured for really, at this point, I think intentional malice, intentional misdirection of our thinking. And, the question is, why would they do that? Because clearly this drawing is now known by the whole academia world as a tampered icon of evolution. Somebody mentioned Darwin's finches, and that's the next icon that I had wanting to share with you, because they were like, okay, with different environments, then we change, right? We adapt. We have a shorter beak or a longer beak or a fatter beak or whatever. But that also takes, thanks, dear.
Are you putting this in the off stream chat while we're in the live stream?
I am, yeah, sorry.
Uh,
I
yeah.
forgot we're not on the live stream.
Yeah, he
sorry.
actually, that guy was actually like caught like making that stuff up. He basically tried to make all the embryos look the same, obviously, as per the chart. But
Yes.
they don't look the same like that at all, actually. And I mean, he was publicly discredited, and yet, even though he was proven to be a fraud, they continued to use his images in textbooks all the way up to, at least as far as I know, the 1990s.
I remember I
Correct.
had that thought immediately when I saw that. I think she was going to say that too, right?
Correct. And that's the point that I was trying to make, is that they tamper with images, they tamper with reality, with the facts, to feed us and misdirect us with what's real. And this is absolutely a great example, when you know that they have, NASA especially, has given us false information, false pictures, tampered with pictures. They use those lenses to make curvature where curvature really isn't, to, give a false view of what reality is. And so I think that this is really important, that they just don't do it with NASA and the globe. They do it, of course, with other things. And in this case, with the icon, an icon of evolution that they keep using. They keep using it. Yeah. So the next one is Darwin's finches, which, you know, they can say, okay, with just the right environment, with just, you know, the right amount of time, people will adapt and change and all of that. And I think that is also something to really scrutinize, because no matter how they want to try to manipulate, let's say, women, right, and men, it's just exactly that, a manipulation, and it's not a natural selection and not a natural change, and it's not, and for these millions of years to go by, or now they're saying, you know, even a million years wasn't enough for them, right? It had to be billions of years. And then if you went to the Natural Museum, Natural History Museum in Washington, D.C., they had this big sign up of millions of years, and then they had to change it. They had to change the sign for 4 billion years. So, yeah, it was never enough for them. So the next icon is this fruit fly, showcasing that, you know, there's diversification, and, you know, and that millions of years normally would have to go by to do this, but in a laboratory, they could do it in a matter of weeks, right? So, yeah. And then the last icon of evolution, you know, there's several, there's a lot, but I just chose these, is this tree of life. And that it would take from this like little thesis, what did you call that? Protozoans and sponges and all of that, up into man, it would take 4 billion years. Now, in the flat Earth community, true Earth community, you see that it goes totally against evolution when it comes to development. And we have proof, hard evidence all over the place by these buildings and technologies, and evidence that something really more advanced was going on than what's happening right now. And, you know, so just because there's a chart that says, oh, we're advancing, doesn't mean that that's the case when the reality says that we are really kind of going downhill instead of advancing. So any comments with that?
Yeah, not only are we not the smartest age, we are the bottom evolved, pit of most devolved, socially engineered, corrupted, subverted, confused, and misdirected generation that's ever walked the earth. So if you think something different, just remember what happened in the last 2 years.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, the way that genetics works really, I mean, flies in the face of how they claim evolution happens, because as we know from genetics, the further down a line of descent that one goes, the more genetic information is lost. And then the only novel variations that can occur due to mutations, but mutations are like bad things, not good things. You know, we can trace back all the dogs in the world to two canines, and you know, those two canines would have had to have the original genetic information for every canine that's ever been, with all of their variations, because they don't just form randomly, they're already coded in.
What an awesome PZO point.
Absolutely. And yeah, that exactly. Genetics itself does not lend to getting better. It's a devolution instead of an evolution. So yeah, that absolutely. But I'm not as negative as Shane is. I feel like there were times when men were pretty bad. So, but the last 2 years, just that we have that much trust, and we don't scrutinize, uh, is worrisome. But I think that it woke a lot of people up, and I know our son's case woke us up because we were, we went to the moon, right? Well, I didn't believe we went to the moon. I didn't believe that. I didn't believe that. I was like, no, that didn't happen because we would be on the moon,
I
Um,
love that.
we would be there by now and we would have, trips up there for,
Like, no,
real
that's
wealthy,
retarded. Come on, obviously.
really, really retarded. So I never really believed, um, to the chagrin of a lot of my neighbors, like, what, you don't believe we went to the moon? No, I don't believe. But, so I really think that it woke up a lot of people. And yeah, so I think we're on I don't know, on a hopeful course. I always try to want to be positive. And one of the positive things is how time works. And I think that we can spend so much time debunking evolution because it's so easy to debunk. Darwin's book is so boring and so bad that they don't even make it required reading. It's so, and I think it's been thoroughly debunked for, especially among the Christian homeschoolers. They debunk it all the time, and there's so much good information out there. I feel like the information for time itself needs to be added to it. And with this whole flat Earth movement, with the whole Dimbleby, the work of Dimbleby, even though he was a glober, and the work of Gleason, I think that's why I wanted to come on and say, look, no way could evolution ever stand against time. No way. But what does? And how do we determine what time is? And I think that's really amazing because, and I think Shane will feel the same way. When you look at your 2024, you just don't say, oh, okay, it's 2024 anymore. You go, oh, what golden number is it? What year in the great astronomical year is it? What eclipses, teams of eclipses are going to come through this year? Is there going to be a transit of Venus or Mercury this year? And these old almanacs even add more fascination to every year, and I think that we've lost that. Is there any comments with
Oh
that?
yeah, we have like the simplest, most elegant, most like complex but fundamental like metric and barometer and fundamental like clock. The way that we tell time, like in the sky, is for us your clock, so that you don't get subverted, confused, told that there is daylight savings time, tail is night and day, and then ask people why it's nighttime. I mean, that's why you have your own personal sky clock, right? And that you can tell the ages, the months, the years, the zodiacs, the lunar, when the next eclipse is, what the sorrow, what the cycles at. You can tell all of that from like the Prague astronomical clock, right? And they don't see those anymore. They remove them, they get rid of them. They don't want you to know about all the cycles. They want to have magic, Newtonian, gravitational, non-three-body problem fucking forces, and rainbow fart that you don't understand. But don't worry, just submit to us. We know, we understand. We'll get it done.
Right. And I was really fortunate to live in Heidelberg, Germany for many years. And right below, south of Heidelberg, is a town called Bruchsal. Bruchsal has a music box clock museum in a palace, in an old palace. And I wish I could go back there now because I think I would appreciate things more. But it was really amazing because they had these astronomical clocks. They had these little watches that were astronomical, handmade. They had music boxes because of that, because they wanted to keep time, and time is the solar cycle 15-year cog, and the moon is the lunar cycle metonic 19-year cycle, and the transit of the wandering stars, Venus, Mercury, or other cogs. The constellations are, then other jewels and cogs in the whole little watch. And we can go on and on with the eclipse cycle, 36 18-year team to create the great astronomical year, this 7-day week. And I don't think that we understand how magnificent the 7-day week is. The 7-day week, there is no solar cycle without the 7-day week. And the 7-day week has never been broken. They've tried to alter it, tamper with it, but we can follow back our history in 7-day segments, which is amazing.
So no king tried to make like a Kinger Day and throw it at the Thursday and had that stand. No, that never happened. Is that what you mean by
Well,
it's never been broken?
tried to do it. France tried to do a 5-day work week or whatever, 5-day week, and Russia, communist Russia, tried to do a 10-day one. They tried, but there is no solar cycle without the 7-day week. They just can't tamper with the 7-day week. And, it's like trying to tamper with the 19-year lunar cycle, right? They just can't do it. It
Wait,
just
why?
doesn't work.
What's the relationship of 7 to the solar? The 7-day to the solar cycle is what?
Yeah. And if you put up, Shane, and I'll try to send it to you right now, but it is the 15-year solar cycle, the Hebrew solar cycle calendar. Do you have that handy? Because I have it. And it's really important to understanding the 7-day week. And I did talk to someone on your Telegram page about it just the other day. Let me see if I can find it. 15-year solar cycle.
That's where I find everything. I control F my Telegram. Oh, look.
Let's see. And I have it right here too. But the whole point of that 15-year solar cycle is it's by 7 days. 7 days, even the intercalary days have to equal the 7 days, and even the 15-year solar cycle before 1722, 1722 years after the prime date, which is creation date. Those extra days, those extra intercalary days had to be of weeks of 7, right? So you had 7 times 11, 77 7-day weeks. It's always by 7-day weeks that create the solar cycle, that create the 15-year solar cycle, that keeps the seasons perfectly. So you have your days and you have your seasons with the 15-year solar cycle. And that's really important because if you're keeping time, self-same days for the sun is every 15 years. So, you can follow back time or go forward in time 15 years for self same days, meaning even on like the Tuesday, uh, January, it's a Tuesday, the 2nd of January. You know, if I had the calendar in front of me, I could tell you exactly. And the sun would be in the same position at the same time, the same size, everything, right? Maybe the clouds would be there, but you know, you would know that that sun is in the same place, same size, everything every 15 years on that Tuesday, January 2nd. That January 2nd Tuesday would continue through time every 15 years.
You know what?
So you could,
But before we had GPS, there was only the comparison of the stars. So it would occur where the stars say that it will. And that's all that ever was. And it's always the same. And then they were like, oh, but there's a whole coordinate system that we invented that here's to a globe that we're going to hear everything to. And you're like, okay, but how does this cycle repeat on this map? And you're like, oh, slightly offset in perpetuity. Wait, so it's a repeating cycle? Yeah. It repeats. And then the spin of the thing we invented kind of offsets the repeating cycle, and you just get infinite fractal patterns until it finally comes back around. That's like a big difference, that they didn't have GPS coordinates that long to muddle about with. They were just like, that's going to occur right there where it occurred the last time, and where it will occur the next time, right? By the start.
yeah, I found it, and I'm going to give it to you right now. Yep, absolutely. So, and this is, okay, so here it is. Here's the calendar. And so you know that July 7th, which would be a Saturday, all of these dates on this calendar, if Shane put it up, all of these dates are Saturdays. And so July 7th, which would be in year A of the 15 years. So the 15 years are just distinguished by the alphabet. So A through O. And every number represents a Saturday. And of course, the months are right there. Month 1 through 12. And then every third year, there's a 13th month. And that 13 months is to re-coordinate the sun and the moon to set the seasons. And that's how this calendar works. And it is amazing. And of course, every month is just 29 or 30 days, because the moon phases in 29 and a half days. And so they alternate 29, 30, 29, 30.
By the way, moon phases are the wackiest, weirdest things that I've never explored, that I accepted without question up until I looked into eclipses. I was like, what the hell is that? Anyway.
Yeah, and for any eclipse, well, a full solar eclipse or solar eclipse to happen, the moon has to be new, right?
Has to be
the
not there, literally. For it to eclipse it, it has to be gone. Like, okay, got it.
Yeah, exactly. So this is how, does anyone have any questions about how this calendar works? I try to, you know, put in red as many things that would kind of help everybody out.
So we got solar calendars, lunar calendars, and then what? The combination lunaria one or whatever.
The other thing that we need to take in consideration. So, you know, evolution says things have to have, in order for them to be like they are today, we have to have millions and billions of years. Okay. And what I'm trying to show you is that we know that we can absolutely call them out. Liar, liar, you know, because we have astronomical measurements, 5 astronomical measurements to be specific, that are so right there in our face, absolute hard evidence that we are not that old. We don't have that kind of time.
Yeah.
We don't have 200,000 years. Okay.
It feels like it was put there in case other men like hid that, obfuscated, and tried to control the world with it or something. You know,
When
Exactly. And so, and one of the very first things that we have is that 15-year solar cycle that is dependent on 7-day weeks. And the point that Gleason makes, and I don't know if it's just Gleason or Dimbleby too, but it's that the 7-day week is not of Hebrew origin. It comes from the prime day. Everything from the prime day is 7-day week. We can follow that 7-day week perfectly. Perfectly. I can tell you with this calendar, you can go back in time, and you can know that it is September, Saturday is the 6th, and it was 2 days after that, so it would be a Tuesday, the 8th. I can date it to the exact day. Now, if that doesn't raise a hair up on your arm, the time, the way time is kept is so perfect. You can get down to the minute or the seconds. And that's why with this last eclipse 2 days ago, they could tell you the eclipse is going to be on April 8th and it's going to start at 2:11 here and at 3:15 by you. And, they could absolutely pinpoint it down to the seconds of when this eclipse would occur. And that's because of the solar cycle that are 7-day weeks. And without the 7-day weeks, NASA would be nothing, absolutely nothing. And, so, and I say, when they talk about Mars and being in outer space, I said, well, what time are you going to use? Because time that you use in your formulations are from Earth. They belong.
Newfoundland time, I assume, for Mars or whatever.
Right. What are you going to use for your calculations? Because all calculations are dependent on time when it comes to this outer space and all of that, right?
It's all depending on the not quite evenly distribution intercedence of the sun and the moon, essentially. The not quite neat intercedence of those two bodies causes the creation of every dynamic system on Earth that I know of.
Yeah, it just really is something of amazement. Okay, so
so
then go ahead.
I was gonna say, when you talk about like evidence that they're lying about how distant the origin of the past was, like the origin point of the past, rather, like I believe that too, but I typically look to like terrestrial observational science to prove that. Are you saying that you have a reason to say that you can prove that they're lying based on just the calendar system?
Correct. Because let's
yeah,
look.
PCO.
If I go back in time every 15 years, self-same days, using 7-day weeks, okay, then I take, so think about that in your mind, because I've been trying to put a chart together to do just that, to go 7-day weeks using this calendar, go back in time. Of course, in year 1722, it switches over to the 7-year calendar solar system because something happened. The flood changed everything. And when you look at the timing, I wanted to do a presentation of Noah's flood and what that did with time.
So you're a believer of the catalyst that happened that set the sun in its eccentricity, which is why it's bouncing back and forth?
It was a perfect lunar year. Absolutely. That's a whole nother discussion, but that time is 1,656 years after the prime date is so important because in 1,722, after the prime date, the calendar was switched to a 15-year solar cycle. The 7-day week never changed. It continued. It's never been broken. That's why it's so important. But the seasons, because that 15-year solar cycle keeps seasons perfectly with the moon. The moon is on a 19-year cycle, and no one can argue that, because even on NASA's page, on other sites, they will tell you the moon is going to be full on this day, and then 19 years later, it will be full again in that same position. Like if there's a GPS in the sky, the moon is the same size, it's in the same position at the same time, 19 years from now. So, I can look at the moon, and if I had a calculator in my head, I could tell you this is what this date was because it happened 19 years ago. And that happens on same days every 19 years. And you can go right now online and look it up. And it's amazing that, the moon that you're looking at will happen again 19 years from now.
Right, but not exactly on the same geographical place. It'll be slightly offset in the ever-perpetuating cycle to get all the way around the equinox in little gradations to complete that grand cycle. And that's the same in everything. But I didn't understand the 7-day week thing. That, like, when they're trying to change stuff, that was the fundamental piece that they couldn't, like that and the sun and the moon, they literally couldn't mess with. So they messed with everything else.
Right. But, you're telling me something new here, and maybe I need to look into it. But from what I understand from the moon is that it will be in the same position, the same height, size, everything every 19 years. Okay. Now the
It'll be there,
eclipse,
but it won't be over the same the geographic GPS coordinates because of the difference in sidereal and solar time and the mean derivation of delta T or terrestrial time over long periods.
Hold on
Anyway.
a second. Real quick. Is that because we're using a 365.24 day year though instead of a 360-day year, Shane? If you were to use the 360-day year, would it end up being the same? Or
the sun itself is not like to get the accurate. It's like a decimal to whatever. And like if you hear Lion, other people talk about it, it also seems to do like weird things. Like so, it's like it does perpetuity, and then like it'll skip a couple, and you're like, what? People have reports of it doing all sorts of stuff. Essentially, the rate at which it appears to move is like constant unless you do it over a long period of time, and then it's somehow not constant, and nobody can figure it out, and it causes mayhem.
right. And the moon is used for the perfect year, for the perfect timing of months and year, right? That's what is very dependable. And you can, the sun is not. The sun is a cycle. It's a cycle of 15 years. And so you're not going to have 365 days be exactly a year.
Well, what
And
exactly is a
because
solar cycle?
a
What does the
solar
sun do?
cycle, okay, let's look at the solar cycle. Let me see if I can, let me see if I have
I couldn't find
video.
anything on it. What I found was clearly a new scientific version. I was like, this is nothing like what I think I need. So I don't know. I don't know where to go for the actual.
I think that the number of days in the moon's years and the number of days in the sun's years are different.
They are.
Look at what I just sent you, Shane. And I think that kind of explains a solar cycle. Let me see if I can. Where's that video that you have? That's so cool. Oh, this is really cool.
I found the published database under the Sun and Moon tab under the section marked Toroidal Earth.
Okay. So that's really cool too. Remember that? I'm wondering if this is from you. But the solar cycle is this. Well, let's get into the eclipse cycle, and I think that helps explain the solar cycle. Because if you know that we keep calendar by 7-day weeks, and and the sun comes back to the self same day every 15 years. The moon comes back to the self same day every 19 years. So if I'm going back in time, those two cycles will start anew on certain years, right? 288 years. Every 288 years, you're going to have a new years of the solar cycle and a new years of the metonic cycle, right? So that date is also very important in keeping time. So if I'm making a chart and one row of it is going to be 15 years of 7-day weeks going back in time, and then I'm going to keep the moon every 29 and a half days, or the phase cycle every month, doing the month alternatively 29 30 days 29 30 days all the way back in time. Well, there are going to be points on that chart where they're going to meet and start anew at the same time. And so those are markers of time.
So the solar cycle is like an intersection of a periodicity that would lead to the outer interlocking wheels that govern the whole interlocking gear. I think. All right. So that's why it's important, I think.
Right. Does that make sense? That someday there will be dates that the solar cycle starting a new 15 year and the lunar cycle starting a new 19 years will be on the same date. And that happens occasionally. And so those are huge markers in time, just like eclipses. And that's this year, 2024, is year one of the eclipse cycle. But is it year one of the metonic? No, I believe it's year 11 of the metonic cycle, right? In 19 years, we're in year 11.
Wow, I didn't get very far at all with the tracking of the cycles. When I realized how hard it was, and I had to know of like all of human history, I was like, but there's a guy
Those
who did it all.
are where these old almanacs come in really, really handy, because
Well,
you can, look at what they're trying to say, and then you can go, do the math and, check it, scrutinize what these old almanacs are saying. And there's, some really important years like 1860 is a very, very important year, because that was, I think, the beginning of the new 651 great astronomical year.
nice.
So,
Yeah.
right. So if 1860 is the beginning of the great astronomical year, which means
Right.
the eclipse, the great eclipse cycle, which means 36 18-year cycles, that is a marker. So from 1860, you can subtract 651 years and you'll find another marker.
Right. But
And then
that's all Dimbleby. Thank God for that guy. He put all that together, right? All of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, and because of the eclipses themselves, right, which I put out a chart before this whole eclipse thing. Let me see if I can find it too. Let me see. I hate this. I hate trying to talk, but anyway.
Yeah, you get used to it.
And trying to find something. But I did put out a chart just recently of the 18 teams. And I think instead of 18 years, you should say 18 teams, because it really is an 18-year, 10, 11-day cycle, because of the difference between 365-day solar year and the 354-day lunar year. So that's where those 10, 11 days come from, is the difference of that.
Even within
And
just the lunar, there's like levels of periodicities and oscillations that don't coincide but do at the final termination. It's kind of crazy. Then you're like, oh, and the sun has a level. Oh, right. Damn.
354, huh?
that's the lunar year, right? Every 354 days, you start a new month for the lunar, right? And that's why we have to have those intercalary days, those leap years, because we have to correlate the moon and the sun together to match the seasons. Does that make sense? So keeping time has all these cogs. It has the metonic cog, the solar cog, the eclipse cog, but it also has like a really big cog called the Great Astronomical Year. And the Great Astronomical Year is these 18 teams of eclipses that never leave their line. So they don't trade out like, teams like football team players, they trade out and go to different teams. Eclipses don't trade out. They stay on their line, right? They stay with their team. And so they're super dependable. And that's why we can say, oh, on April 8th, we're going to have a full solar eclipse and it's going to happen at so-and-so time. And that was Adam's eclipse. I hope everyone knows that. That was Adam's eclipse. That was number 1 in 70 eclipses. So there's normally about, pretty dependable 70 eclipses. And those eclipses, we can absolutely tell you if they're going to be a lunar eclipse, or if they're going to be a partial lunar eclipse, or if they're going to be a partial solar eclipse, or they're going to be a full solar eclipse, an annual solar eclipse. We can tell you their character because we know their character, because we've kept their time for ages, right? And we've kept time by them. And that's why a lot of these old structures are built to feature a eclipse or the equinox, or whatever, a certain day. I know living in Ireland, there's that one place where the sun comes in just the right time and it does this and this and this, right? And we can absolutely know that that's going to come back again. And that's why they could build these fascinating buildings and, even go to the pyramids, and the pyramids align with certain stars at certain times and all of this. But the eclipses are 70 eclipses. If you know those 70 eclipses, you're good to go. And they repeat every 18 years.
They go like solar annual, partial solar, partial annual. Like that sequence is named and it never varies. That's a crazy thing. And you're like, oh, if this is a partial lunar, guess what's next? Well, according to the cycle, it's going to be this one. And you're like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. Holy cow.
So April 8th was the first eclipse that ever happened in creation, which was so cool. And, in 18 years, I can see Adam's eclipse again, right? So, and this year we're going to have, when I say a full eclipse, it could be a central eclipse or an annular eclipse, right? So a full eclipse, a partial lunar eclipse, and a full eclipse. So that's what we're going to get this year in this team. And that team will show up again 18 years from now, 18 years, 10, 11 days. And we can just cut and paste it. And when we cut and paste it, because of those 10, 11 days, it creates what I call the Milky Way effect, right? It gives you those arms, those, it makes that spiral, which, absolutely corroborates that we live in an electromagnetic world, right? So it has that spiral effect. Now, 18 of those spiral effects, you have to have 18 of them, and then you have to have another 18 of them to create 36. I remember that as the decan, the 36 constellations, or the 360 degrees, because it makes a full cycle going through the 36 eclipses. And every one of those is a timestamp. Every one of those is a timestamp. So you have time markers, the 651, 651, 651, and you have the timestamps of every eclipse, which is amazing.
And then someone
And
like
with the-
Fred goes and puts those timestamps in a book, and they're like, magic NASA predictions. And you're like, wait, guys.
Exactly. Okay, so now we've talked about 3 ways to keep time and to go back in time to prove if evolution can even exist. And that is the 19 years, let's cut and paste 19 years back in time, right? Let's cut and paste 15 years back in time over and over again. Let's cut and paste the 18-year, 10, 11 days back in time, and maybe with all this AI, we'll be able to do it, right? We'll be able to cut and paste all these things all the way back in time. But
Well-
it's not only that, it gets even more remarkable. And let me share that. Oh, does anybody have any comments about the eclipses? I have
Yeah.
another one.
So the cycle, right? Once you figure out the 1 metric unit, people to not figure out how few there are, they just add infinite amounts on either side. They do the Soros in a panorama of like 10 billion eclipses or some retarded number, and they're like, look at how many, look how pretty. And you're like, okay. And then they go the other way and they do like 6,000 for years that have never existed, and they go, oh, look at this other periodicity comparison. And you're like, but why do you guys keep doing that? Why do you keep adding these extra years and engaging and trying to tell me how many there are? Turns out if there's 651 years a cycle, it's only like what, 8, 9 of those ever, period. So come on, guys.
Right. And let's talk about the elephant in the room. There's no randomness in this. There's no randomness. There's no chaos. Right? There's no, oops. He has
Galaxy spinning, and except it's the same spin every 18 years. It's cool, whatever, guys.
Right? There's no randomness. And then the other thing about the eclipses is that they have dependable paths. So that path, the Nineveh path, right? Oh, it's going over 5 cities that have Nineveh's name, maybe even 7 cities, right? That had Nineveh, right? Because that path was known for that eclipse on that day, just like the St. Michael's ley line, just like the St. Raphael's ley line. You have these paths and they know them. They're dependable. So even the direction that they are moving is dependable.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
So I get the precision of calculating how far back it would have happened or how far forward it will happen. But how can you use either of those things to independently and verifiably claim how many of these there have been in the past?
Because you can trace it back. Like once you have one, you have all of them. And there's a dude named, I think, Shrinko or something. Shrinko, someone help me out, who did 5 books of chronology, literally using the eclipse cycle. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. As a metric, and he approached all of history, figured out it was all wrong, and moreover, figured out it was all wrong in the same way and in the same spots all over across the world, across all cultures. And we're like, interesting. So when you compare it to the sky, they done lied and all bought all the same parts, and they injected like 1,000 years in all the same cultures. So you're like, that's useful, and we need to learn about that. So we need to figure out what the hell's really going on.
No,
I
mean
Scaligerian timeline. That
Yeah, he's the opposite to the Scaligerian, which is the common mainstream timeline. He also said the Quran is written all over the Kremlin.
what's his name?
Anatoly Fomenko.
Hold on, I have all the books. Let's get
Can you type in the chat?
That's right.
Yeah, you want the books?
Yeah,
I
we'll
got
get the
books
link,
too.
the one link with all the books.
But anyways, my point though is you're talking about recorded history and the human era, which we believe in. I'm saying in their paradigm, if I was one of those people and you came and told me this, what would stop me from saying, okay, But these same cycles, I agree with everything you're saying about these same cycles. You're totally right. They're totally accurate. But I can trace them back, 100. I can tell you what they would have been 100 cycles ago. It would have been the year 55,000 BC or something. You know what I'm saying? Like, what prevents that from being a thing?
Well, this is,
Unanimously.
well, so you have independent corroboration. That's why there's 5 lines, because she said they intersect. So when one doesn't tell you enough information, another dimension or dynamic comes from the solar. When that intercedes doesn't tell you enough, then you look to like the transits of one of the bodies, like the old people had to do before they had the chronometer to determine periodicity in relation to the night sky, right? And then finally, you have independent corroboration from the all 3. Like with any one of the metrics, you can get to a certain point, but using all of them or more than 2, you always end up with
Well,
that
there's
ending.
5,
Yeah.
right? There's 5 because, we have the 15-year solar cycle, the 19-year moon cycle, the 18-year eclipse cycle, which extends to, the 325-year first half of the 651 year. And then you have the second half, 326 years. And those, let's say you say the first half is A and the second half is B. Well, then they alternate back in time. So you know that we are in, like right now, I believe, because of course, man always tries to manipulate a little bit of our calendars, right? So you have to use the moon and the sun and the eclipses to give you the right time, because our time is a little bit off, skewed with the Gregorian and the way they do the leap years and all of that. So that's why that Hebrew calendar, it's called the Hebrew calendar, the 15-year cycle is so important. And we're not synced to that right now because we're using the Gregorian calendar.
Also, Dimbleby did a huge chunk of the work and essentially carved out one like full astronomical year. Like he told us like one unit, tied it to dates, gave it a real presence, brought it to where he was, and like concluded a big cycle. So with that in mind, you can go in either direction and determine how many of those cycles there have ever been coinciding with the other parts.
So it is a great way to test what they're telling us, right? And then you have, of course, the transits of Venus and Mercury, which is another huge way of keeping time. And, I have it right in front of me. Venus in 1631 on December 7th transited the sun. In 1639 on December 4th, it transited the sun. In 1761, June 6th, it transited the sun. In 1769, June 3rd, it transited the sun. And there's a pattern here, and it goes December, December, June, June, December, December, June, June, December, December, June, June, December, December, June, June, December. When's the next one going to happen? Right? It's going to be in December. Right? And then it'll be 2 Junes.
But that's because of gravity,
And then
I
it'll
thought.
be 2 Decembers. And then you can look at the years, and you can even know, they even know the exact day that you can look up at the sun and see Venus transiting the sun. And Venus, I think, is larger than Mercury. Venus is much larger. You can see it much easier as it transits the sun. So that's another marker. And so you can, okay, let's say we make a chart and we put the chart, the 15-year cycle, the 19-year cycle on top of that, the 18 and 10, 11 day cycle on top of that. And then we put Venus on top of that. We put Mercury on top of that, which has it does, you can see, and I don't know if you have that, Shane, but I had that also ready to give everyone. You can see the pattern that they make up in the sky. And of course, Mercury is further out because it does these little loops around us, whereas Venus does that beautiful flower star, right? That's closer to the center.
Oh, the beautiful
Over.
geocentric derivations of the toroidal flower patterns in the sky. Right. How could I forget? Hold on.
Yes. And you can look, and I'll show you. Let me see, because I know that I put that out to send to you. because I think it's really important for everyone to see. Yeah, here it is. I found it. Okay. I think this is important because this is Venus. And Venus is going along its path, but the sun is going along its path also. And so when are they going to meet where Venus can transit it, you know? And so I think this is a neat illustration that shows why there's this pattern of time. December, December, June, June, December, December, June, June. And you can actually see why it would make that pattern using the sun.
Sacred geometry. Oh my God. So like, if you understand basic geometry, you know, on a side note, when I dove deep into Kepler and Newton and the kinematic equivalency, it all comes down to conic sections and lines, and they literally just took geometry and poofed it up to make it what nonsense it is today. If you break it down and you get down to it, it is just geometry, and this is just sacred sky geometry.
Correct. And just to tell you the dates of Mercury, it's November, 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 May, November, May, November, 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 May, November, May, November, 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 May, November, 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 May. So, you know, and I'll send you these because I think I've already sent you these, but I think they're just super fascinating because they're so dependable. There's no randomness with them. Oh, it just happens to be there, right? That's not the case when it comes to reality, but they want us to believe that when it comes to our own how we became, how we existed, and everything that we know, everything that we can see in reality works against the theory of evolution. And now when you put together all the time, so you're going to have the eclipse line, the metonic line, the solar line, the transits of Venus and Moon line. You know, you can even add the timing of all the stars in the heavens and the way they move and all of that, because people have timed all that out too perfectly. That's why we have the clock the way we have it. It's all astronomical. It's all astronomical measurement. And then you can go to the writings. You know, you can go to the Egyptian writings, the Chaldean writings, the biblical writings. You can go to history itself, the Chinese writings, and you can make a chart to go back. And this is what Dimbleby did. That is so fascinating. And I've been going through it with Gleason and Dimbleby and Usher. I don't know if y'all know about James Usher.
Those other chronologists?
He's a kindergartner compared to Dimbleby. But anyway, you know, it's like, you know, you go back and you test all of this and you make these charts, and Shane will tell you, I've been, you know, if I want to get my mind off of the evil institutions that are not giving us answers about our sun, I'll just go and start putting numbers in a chart, right?
And they all
follow
smart. Yep. And then we steal it and we put it on the internet, and it gets it gets to everyone. So, you know, reasons.
you know, you know, it makes you so happy. It makes you so happy because those dates, those markers, those timestamps. Okay, so you have the real intricate timestamps, but then you have these markers, these huge markers, 651. And when you put them all back in time, they all meet. They all meet, and it's called the prime date. They all begin at one time, the prime date. Now, how can all of this happen and they all have one day where they all begin?
It's a good question.
I guess they could say,
Right?
well, what if that's just like one cycle of perpetuity and we don't know how many perpetuity cycles there are, or whatever the point was from before, right?
What exactly is the prime date? in layman terms?
So, like when you have intersecting periodicities that line up to give you other periodicities in expanding concentric gears of wheels that determine interlocking like levels, then at the end, when all of them line up, then there couldn't possibly be anything further, right? Because everything in the world just coincided to like at one time. You're like, oh, never seen that before. That must be like the first.
That's Shane's definition. My definition is when God said, "Let there be light."
Astronomical.
I was gonna say that. The Bible, though, is like the number one resource to matching up the first dates, and that's a big part of how they do it. So yeah, there's that.
But you can use time right now, like where, no one can deny that we had an eclipse on April 8th and that it was a full lunar eclipse and that it was a certain size and it moved a certain speed and
Lasted a certain
it
duration.
moved on a certain path. No one can deny that, right? And so we have these lines through Chaldeans and Egyptians. So architecture itself helps us get more insight into the clock in the sky. And, I feel like after all of this research and knowing that the most bombed place on Earth, do y'all know where it is? The most bombed place on Earth?
Currently or ever?
Florida?
Ever? Well, in modern time.
Oh, is it Yemen or Syria?
Wherever we did the most.
Laos.
Ooh.
What?
Vietnam? Oh, right. Isn't it?
Laos.
Laos.
Laos
Wow.
is the most bombed, months and months and months of carpet bombing. Why? What was there?
I'm sure it was like
Well,
heroin
it's not
or
there
like
anymore.
little
Whatever it
communist terrorists or whatever they told us it was. Wasn't we started the war?
Many star forts, many
Yeah.
pyramids, how many star forts, how many pyramids, how many, what do you call that thing in England that aligns with the stars that they want us to believe in?
Stonehenge.
Stonehenges. How many Stonehenges or, what was there? Because, it just doesn't make any sense that Laos was bombed over and over and over again. And, and I know from being German that Eastern Germany was the place. It was that's why Dresden was so bombed. It was
I was
the
gonna
place.
say Dresden too.
Oh man.
Yeah, that was gonna be my thing, was Dresden, but
Yeah, what were they trying to hide? And then my son-in-law is South Korean, and so I've been to South Korea lots of times, and I love to talk to people. The older people tell you North Korea was it. It was it. It was the churches, the cathedrals, the everything was there, is there, right? So what are they hiding from us in North Korea? Because I was like, wow, there's a real building movement and a Christian movement going on in South Korea. And they're like, it's nothing compared to what was going on in North Korea. So, so all of these, it just broadens your mind that we're not being told the truth, and they're covering up things that could help us figure out time itself, and put everything together. And they push evolution. Pushing evolution means that's a theory. That's a con job. And they push NASA everywhere. I have 9 grandchildren. It's so hard to go through any kind of toys without seeing anything NASA, so they put. Mhm.
They push like the longevity of the duration of years all over everywhere. Like once I did eclipses, I started like noticing it, not only for it because you need it for evolution, because you need it for the Big Bang, because you need it for molecular biology, like because you need it for a fish monkey to grow into a series of eyeballs to develop the human eye to see sight, to go from land to amphibian to develop lungs or whatever, and then do play and environmental changes over long. You need all of that to have any of it. So that's why it has to be long dinosaurs need evolution and asteroids, and we needed 1 million years for the Earth to form and galactic accretion, and all of it is dependent upon this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have 10 points here to argue against the theory of evolution. The 651 great astronomical year emphasizes the consistent cyclical nature of solar and lunar events over the long periods of time, demonstrating a designed and predictable pattern rather than random evolutionary processes. So that's really important, because when you read the book, when you listen to what they preach, it all depends on random evolutionary processes, right? Number 2, eclipses occurring in a specific order and alignment proves a carefully orchestrated system, which could be interpreted as evidence of intelligent design rather than random chance. And they think, that randomly from an explosion, and I've never seen an explosion create any order. Right?
There's a good point there that like the eclipse cycles themselves can be predicted with periodicity and like post-predicted, but Fred and all the people who do it don't create the 3D models of the 3 supposed bodies involved, because that's retarded and impossible. They leave that to NASA, who does all sorts of, as PZO pointed out, ridiculous attempts at correctly describing with the correct speeds and directions of how this actually occurs. And so far, for like 100 billion or whatever. So all they predict is the place, and the actual 3D modeling is not a part of any cycle, and actually notoriously tricky. So
Right. And the accuracy and the repeatability of the solar, the lunar, the eclipse, the transits of the wandering stars, all demonstrates the predetermined structure rather than a random mutation, right? There's no random mutation here. It's all predetermined structure that totally debunks the theory of evolution. Number 4, historical records and ancient accounts of eclipses align with present day patterns. And, that is, to me, that puts a skip in anybody's walk, to know that they could try to tamper with things, that they could try to misdirect you. But if you just pay attention a little bit, you can see that there's proof everywhere for evidence of a fixed, unchanging system, a fixed, dependable, unchanging system. And, what does Barack Obama say? We need change. No, we have a fixed, unchanging system. And, it's based on laws. And what are the implications of that? Right? What are the implications? So there's not evolving species, right? It doesn't fit.
Surrender to a lion. You're a human. You're better over. You're governor of everything. Don't be ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. The consistent alignment of eclipses with specific dates disprove gradual random changes too. And any kind of diverse, let's say, that one thing can cause a diversity of life, right? Meaning that I can come from a microbe and it turns into a chicken, and the chicken turns in, or maybe it's a tree and the tree can become human. I don't know. They're just And they're trying real hard to do some really weird diversity stuff, instead of appreciating everybody's, what would you call it?
Well, what's interesting is
Definition.
what they're doing isn't diversity. Diversity is what nature is, the separation of species and kinds. What they're
Correct. Thank
doing
you.
is
Mhm.
inversion of diversity.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for saying it that way. That was a very good
Sorry to cut you
explanation.
off, though.
No, that was really great. The Great Astronomical Year emphasizes the unerring predictability of eclipses and celestial events, contradicting the concept of evolution, which would be an unpredictable and contingent on the environment and adaptation. So I think that was a really good point too. 7, eclipses returning to their original position after specific intervals over time proves preordained order. Like if we were flying through space, right? That would never happen. How could that ever happen? With all of that motion, turning and twisting and going through space and all the stars there, it would just,
Didn't we?
you
Have we had
wouldn't have
a
a system.
discussion of that with Bardic just yesterday? When there's like a repetition of 3 and they come back 30 degrees offset. So like by the third one, it's technically back where it started if there was no difference between solar and sidereal time. And you're like, oh, that's not true. And it's like, no, it is. It's itself part of a bigger cycle, and it's one of those layered intersecting periodicities that we spoke about earlier, right?
Right. And the stars, in their constellations, the wandering stars, and in their movement, and I think maybe, I don't know whose side I saw it on, but somebody was trying to say that the patterns that the wandering stars make prove the globe.
Yikes.
And it didn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense. And I was trying to see his point, but it didn't make any sense.
Well,
So
it does make sense, actually, because what they do is they take our proof, they say it's not, that it supports them, and then no one checks it. That's what happened every time. But that's how it starts, I guess. They just do that.
3959. Took it and
yeah,
inverted it.
exactly. They just inverted it, and the patterns come from Earth. You have to be on Earth to see the patterns, right?
Well,
Anyway,
how about within like the static markers of the sky, like within the background of the stars in the zodiac? That's primarily how we tell, because that's how we made all our maps, and that's how we know where we are on Earth totally, it turns out. So like when they compare it to Earth, it's like, nah, it's just the sky. It's always been the sky. Matter of fact, don't even get confused. Just worry about the sky.
right. And the timestamps of the analemmas are so predictable. And there's so many videos out there now of people taking those timestamps once a month to make the analemmas. And of course, for the moon, it's different. And we're all, I don't know about y'all, but I'm still trying to figure out the moon because it's a mystery.
Phases got me for sure. Like I never looked into it until I was 37 or whatever, and I was like, huh, that's a crazy thing that happens all the time that nobody talks about.
You'll figure it out eventually, though. It's just a phase.
Nice.
Yeah. The analemmas definitely are like those timestamps, and they're dependable. And that's the point that this is making, countering any kind of evolutionary concept of undirected, unguided processes, right? It's absolutely disproved when you even just look at the analemma. The regularity and the consistency of astronomical phenomenon prove a fixed and unchanging world order, which may conflict, it does, with the ongoing theory of evolution and adaptation.
And the Copernican
So, which I
principle.
think is totally racist. If you ever teach evolution, it's totally racist.
Or anti-Semitic or something. I bet.
And they push it, and then they push it. It's like, okay, whatever.
Well, teaching
Well, that's the
proper
thing. They
mathematics is
go.
now racist, so you can't win.
Speaking of that, don't we have like a homeschooling board internet project team chat somewhere we could post to get people connected with that? Since can't send them to government school.
We should start something like that if it's not
I
already.
know when we have something, we should talk about it real quick before we forget, because I know Patricia has like a site or an architecture or something set up.
Well, it hasn't been used for almost 3 years now because of what's going on with our sun. And I will tell you this, that the whole flat earth movement is scaring the pants off of them, because what happened in our son's case, from my point of view, is he got to El Paso and he saw the corruption. He reported the corruption because he wanted to be CID, and they won't give us his academic records. We're working on that, but to know what classes he was taking and if he was a CID intern, like reported to us. But that would explain why he knew what was going on in the law enforcement community and all of the crimes that they were committing. And it's a very, very big deal, because it all goes back to this El Paso Community Foundation, big money, millions, billions of dollars. And they, of course, let's just say the UTEP president that we just put in a criminal complaint about, she was appointed to the Space Commission for Texas, the newly created Space Commission for Texas. And, really all it's about is passing bonds to tax people to steal money for these absurd projects. And, and space is a big one. Space is a big one. Yeah. Space is a big one. Water is a big one. Development, property development, and everything. And he pulled on a string, and they tried to protect their gravy train. And their gravy train is the business of misleading us and fooling us, hoaxing us, like with COVID.
I mean, for everything you've been through, though, you have seen through all of the bullshit at this point, right? So the government tries to tell you something, you're like, no, I'm not gonna listen to you. That, of course not. Not even like, should I? Would I? You're like, nope. And that's the proper perspective.
And I think and we were doing that. We were not believing what they were saying because of, we know our son, right? And, they were trying to tell us that he was some kind of El Capone. And I'm like, really? Wow. He was just learning how to drive in Ireland on the wrong side, and now you're telling me that he's with these cartel groups that, I don't think he would the cartel would take this kindly for him butting in their business, but they were trying to tell us some kind of really absurd things, and we knew it was wrong. And but when that one person, and I don't know the person's name, told us, hey, if they lie to us about the moon, they'll lie to us about your son. And, I'm very grateful for that, because it really did. It was like an epiphany moment, open the mind moment. And Shane kind of was one of the very first people that I was watching on Odyssey, right? Do you remember that, Shane? And that's how we got connected. I was just like, oh, he's kind of new at this too. He's asking the same questions we're asking. So
I was just
yeah,
linking Odyssey because that's the place you can post things that get blocked everywhere else. I love Odyssey still.
yeah, that's yeah, I need to focus more on Odyssey when it comes to our son's case. But yeah, that was the beginning of saying, oh no, they are really, there's something else going on here. And of course, share all the information on Richard Haliday, because that's what they hate most is people understanding Richard's case, because you'll say, shut down the military, shut down Fort Bliss, shut down the space program. That's what you'll say once you learn his case, because it really is one big scam job, and it's worth millions and millions, millions of dollars. Everybody knows it. Yeah.
But you got nice insight into how the government actually works with shadowy compartmentalization and a governing body held by the people with the most to the top of BlackRock and Vanguard, who literally corporatized and conglomeratized everything. And they're like, oh, that's who runs stuff, and who checks them? Oh, nobody. Terrific. Well, what do I do about like my son? And they're like, oh, well, they do what they want, and then you can protest or whatever, or like tell people, and then that's how it is. Like,
But the beautiful thing is the stars in their course fought against Sisera. And I really understand that verse. That's one of my favorite verses. If anyone knows the Song of Deborah, she's like, who in the world got this person, this leader, this amazing leader that nobody else could get, that was totally evil? And, the stars in their courses, right? So the point, what we've learned through this whole thing is if you don't give up and you keep going, they will have to give you some justice. And, we did get some lately, and we want our son's remains, and we want accountability. And you have to have faith to say that, right? Because people say, oh, you're up against this big monster. I think that we're way more powerful, and the truth is way more powerful than what we even realize. And they are not as strong as we think they are. That's what we've
100%
learned.
with you. Hear that, Dave? Is Dave here? Dave, you hear that?
These generals, when we got there, just little old me and my husband were really, we're not rich or anything like that. We don't have power like they do, institutional power like they do. And when we got there, they were shaking. They were shaking,
Tenacity,
visibly
perseverance. Hell yeah.
shaking. And so, so if you just persevere, keep going, and do not, they're going to try to, we've been threatened, we've been blocked, we've been shadow banned, we've vile and vulgar messages constantly, blocking our open records request. I can't even tell you what all the things they've done to our family, through all of this. And you just have to just keep going and going and going and never give up.
I remember when I first met you, I was just discovering the government. You were like, I want justice. And I was like, oh, but they do like atrocities all the time everywhere. It turns out you want them to admit, oh boy. Well, how about I think we should burn down the whole thing. That's where I'm at. What do you want to do? Like, I couldn't understand.
Well, look, we've got, we have exposed the Walmart mass shooting of August 3rd, 2019.
Yep.
Through all of this and the death of, and I hope that his family gets gets justice too. And that is Glendon Oakley Jr., another soldier. But, you just have to keep going, because they are ruthless. And if we are afraid of them, they will take advantage. If we
100%.
stand up against
Yeah.
them, yes.
Yeah, their weapon is fear. But like the incremental progress that you make all the time is I was like, I don't know how to start fighting it. And then I looked back over a year and I was like, oh, exactly like that. And that lady had it right. Damn. I was like, all right, right. You just keep going personally what you can do, and then other people will, follow, and that's literally the only way you can do it. I was like, marvelous. What a great lesson.
Yeah. And evolution is a tool that they use against us, because this world has so much to still discover. And they don't want us to know about all the electromagnetic energy and, all the things that people are just. That's why they don't like TikTok, because TikTok, they're posting all kinds of stuff on there. And I'm like, wow, this is kind of wonderful. And I was told, oh, that's Chinese. I'm like, what is in Chinese? It's
Right.
it's yeah, so there's so many things, the free energy and all this, the architecture that the flat earth movement is going back and looking at, and these ley lines and the astronomical measurements, and Shane does all this mathematics, and I'm like, whatever, okay.
I'm unimpressed. Pass.
um, these formulas. Anyway, so any questions? Thank you so much,
Yeah,
everybody.
your stuff is way better. It's way more artsy. I put it as a thumbnail. I get like 1,000 views. People have no idea what it is. Doesn't matter. It's just like, what is that? Oh, stupid flat earth got me again. Whatever. Whatever happens
No,
to
I
them.
didn't mean to say it like that, Shane, because I love it. Because you only need a few people to understand for that kind of mathematics. You
I've
only
been
need a
finding
few
that.
to
Yeah.
really. Mm-hmm.
Well, actually,
Yeah.
really, it turns out you just need like with it to support it, and then everyone will just repeat it. That's kind of the secret.
Right. And then when you read an article that says that the Chinese are building a missile base on the dark side of the moon,
No.
And be
you
fearful, and the
Yeah.
scarcity and climate change and all that shit that goes with the globe and joy or whatever.
Exactly. So it really gives you a lot of freedom. Yep.
Yeah, that chronology link, man. Those 5 books, that dude. I remember I learned all this, and I was like, oh, I have so much work to do about everything, uncovering all of history. And then I was like, oh, dude, I already did it. Sweet. I guess I just gotta go read these 5 books, and I immediately didn't. So I have to literally go back and probably inspire community effort to read those 5 books. There's a lot of them. We really should get through that and uncover the specific portions of culture and time that have been interjected and or elongated correlatively throughout all of the cultures.
Right. And Dimbleby kind of did that with that gauge proving all past time, which is 0, of course, the prime date, and then 651 years. The 651 years, we're in the 10th one. Okay. There's been 9 651 year cycles before us. And when you follow them back with all those other cycles, they will all meet at the prime date, which is amazing. And now you can say, oh, okay, well, maybe that is just another really big cycle in the scope of everything. But why don't we just learn this one first? And that it is not random, that you can depend on it. That in itself proves that evolution is a fraud. Because for evolution to work, it has to be chaos, random, mutations, blah, blah, blah.
Billions of years, giants, the dinosaurs, comets, galactic accretion, Big Bang, everything from nothing all at once, galactic accretion, everything Jesuits named by the creators. It's all cool. Go back to sleep.
Exactly. And I did give you those spirals that they put out, right? So the spirals made me laugh, because it's like they can never make their own stuff. right? They can never make their own stuff. They're always stealing everything.
What was that? Was that thing about like the Demiurge or whatever, the old tell about the god and the creator god, and how he can't actually can't actually create anything, so he has to subvert what's already been created to do his thing? Isn't there something there?
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. Yeah, so I did have some other notes here. Precise astronomical measurements, cyclical nature of eclipses, the complexity of the eclipses, the alignment of biblical chronology, consistency across time, unchanging lunar orbit. Yeah, we didn't talk about that, but that's pretty cool. The repetitive patterns, the lack of evolutionary evidence, historical accuracy, and the stability of the moon, which is, yeah, it doesn't adapt. So,
It's a nice list
any
you had
questions,
going.
everybody? I don't know how many. Okay, are there any questions or statements?
I've been interrupting all the time with my questions. What about everybody else? Nope.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for chiming into this, and I hope I can do one explaining Noah's flood, the year 1656 after the prime date. Yeah, that is really amazing, and I think that that is a huge time marker in the scope of everything.
Well, thank you so
Nice.
much for coming, Patricia. This was really excellent. I really appreciated your presentation and your organization of all this information. There's a lot clearly to take in with all these different cycles, and the way you've laid it out, it was pretty fantastic. So yeah, thanks for coming. I really, if you want to come do your presentation about the flood, that would be awesome. I mean, we'd definitely be happy to have you back again.
I know that your presentation the last time was like the foundation of my eclipse knowledge that I had when I spouted off on somebody on Twitter and then did like 40 hours of eclipse research or whatever. So it's just like the catalyst for all of it. So this will probably have a similar effect.
I got a quick
Thank
question.
you.
This recent eclipse and the moon's location and behavior, was it what you expected, or were you not really tracking it in that way?
How do you track the new moon again?
Absolutely, it was a new moon. So the moon disappears, right, for over 60 hours.
Yeah, who was tracking it? Wait, what?
Right.
So you really can't, you know, you can do the lunar analemma, right? And the lunar analemma is so different from the solar analemma.
Because those period is always missing. It's like rotating,
Exactly.
missing links. It's crazy.
Yeah, so the moon is the big mystery. It really is. And I'm thinking that the moon doesn't move as fast as the sun. And, like the models that are out there, that the quickness of the moon, but, I just can't prove it. And it's such a mystery.
It's a trick
But the
of
way the
optics, right?
analemma works, it just seems, and the way clocks work, you have your minute hand, you have your hour hand. The moon seems to be moving much slower than what people think, to me. So anyway, that would be a great presentation for somebody to do that knows a lot about the moon.
Yeah, the geocentric position that was hard. Like, so the speed is similar, but a little off, and then the lining up is like geometrically not planar. So there's a tilt, like because they took the 23.4 degree tilt of the world, and it's just the sun's ecliptic. They made the world tilt at that, and then the moon has its own like 5-degree tilt, and then that intercedence adds like another layer of gradation, which is why it doesn't intersect every time when they go by or when they have a new moon. It's that long,
Right.
19-year cycle.
And a solar eclipse can't happen unless the moon is new.
Literally, it's unless it's not there, there won't be anything eclipsing or occulting itself or whatever. Dude, I was looking into it. I'm like, that can't be. I was worried. I'm like, how am I going to explain it? And then I was like, oh, the regular freaking explanation will do fine. What the hell is this?
Right. So, and we're so behind because our education doesn't cover this, right? Our education doesn't cover this. We have to learn it as we get interested and push ourselves to look into all this stuff. But there is no eclipse unless the moon is new. And so then it leads you to, well, how does, what makes the moon new, right?
Can't be photographed. If it's in a shadow, can you get like a glimpse of it? Nothing. Zero. Okay, cool. Well, if it's in the sun, can you get a glimpse of a crater? Nothing except for that one perfect one. Interesting.
Yeah, and then they tell us that the moon is solid.
That's where Enoch is good.
We can't see it approach the sun. They say that the moon, covering the sun is what causes the eclipse. But we don't see the moon approach the sun, right? We don't see it leave the sun. And yet that's what they say is the moon. And then they say it's a solid. And, so nothing they say makes sense. But because we're compliant people, we're peaceful people, we're tolerant people, we just seem to, okay, you put on a uniform or a white coat and I'm going to say, okay, you're smarter than me and you're right, I just have to believe you.
Inherent appeal to authority. Yeah.
That's the classroom, so that must be true.
Appeal to majority and authority all the time. I was like, I don't get it, but like other people think it's a globe, so that must be wrong or whatever. That's how that works.
And I hate to say that, when I'm talking in terms of my son's case, and 44 four-star generals, we have 44 four-star generals and admirals right now. We had 7 during World War II, and we had 10 times more troops. But, we have 44 four-star generals and admirals in our uniforms, okay? And they have authority in those uniforms. And instead of, because I'm a peaceful person, and I don't want to discredit the uniform. I want to say those people that are in those uniforms, that our Senate Arms Committee and our Congressional Arms Committee put in those uniforms to give them the authority of those uniforms, because it's the uniforms and those stars that they wear that give them the authority. And they're serving foreign and domestic enemies right now. And 100%. There's no doubt in my mind. There's no doubt in my mind, and none of this could happen. But we give them the authority because we place them in those uniforms. And so it's not the uniforms. It's kind of like it's not the gun that kills you, that murders. It's not the uniform that murders. It's these. It's the lack of oversight and the selection of who's going to wear those uniforms. And, who gave NASA the right? Who gave them the uniform of NASA to extract millions of dollars a day from us for BS? For BS.
That's what, like, when they give themselves the power, they write the bill, they sign the check, and then they smile for the camera. That's kind of how it works.
That's right. That's right. It's a con job. It's a hoax, just like
foreign aid, COVID, government relief, all the COVID bills, all the stuff that it's all public money laundering.
It's
order longitude.
Profitable. It's very profitable. Yeah. So, so I'm sorry that I got a little bit on my high horse there, but I just want to say the stars in their courses fought against Sisera. Yep. And just keep on with the systems and the cycles, and we'll get the truth, and keep fighting for the truth in a peaceful, very productive way. That's it.
I mean, like, everyone can't be peaceful. Everyone do their own way, I would say, and let's see what happens or whatever.
They don't like peace.
Right, but I mean,
they make a lot of money off of war.
That's true. But as we just discovered, I dropped in to talk to Dogs today, and he quickly informed me that every war was always justified and always fought. And I was like, no, opposite. Media lied. Everyone went to war for nothing. Nobody wants to kill each other. That's the truth. But you think the news is real, and you have a completely warped sense of that. Like, oh boy, I forgot that's where most people live.
They see us, these boogeymen, they're always trying to create war and conflict, and that's why I talk peace, because they're always trying to create conflict. Yep.
Distract,
you look
divide,
at
and conquer.
mass shooting, what did they do? They blamed it on Patrick Crucius, who has autism. They still, 5 years later, have not done a mental health evaluation on him, right? And they try to blame it on one person. This is a lone shooting, and it is a white supremacist, or, they try to divide people. And that's not what it was for. It was about a diversion and lots of money.
Usually they don't say the
Lots of
race if
money.
it's white. They only say it if it's everything else. Or do I not know the rules or whatever?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, we have to be peaceful and beware of the con jobs.
Yeah, I think that once you go at a certain level, like you went, your level of discernment is just like, oh, COVID, no, that's a solid moon you landed on. Give me a break, and then you just you naturally find yourself uncovering the secrets that are the truth that you need to, thrive and/or mostly get where you need, but learn to survive, right?
Right. Well, COVID. Okay, so we got to El Paso in September of 2020. So COVID was really getting started. We went over 36 times over to Juarez, to Mexico. People were telling me I better, wear a mask and this. I said, no, I don't have time for any of that. I want to find my son, and I need to talk to people. They need to see my face. I went into all kinds of soup kitchens and drug rehabilitation and standing in the methadone lines and going to parks where people, are taking drugs and hugging people, and they're crying on me because, they've lost their job. Now they have to prostitute themselves, all this stuff. Come back over to El Paso. We're eating in places, not the cleanest places. All of this stuff. I should be dead. And I'm not.
Yeah, quickly you learned. I'm like, oh, you just said some stuff. They're gonna stop me from driving on the road. No, they're gonna announce it on TV. Oh, so when I go to work, are they gonna stop me from? No. All right, well, fuck them then. I'm just gonna keep doing what I'm doing. I think, right? Like, what do you mean?
We just kept doing what
Yep.
we were doing. We went into the churches. We went into the organizations. Anything that was open. We went over the border walking. We had to stand in line. We had to go through all of those snake lines, right? Going back and forth across the border over 36 times. So, you learn real quick, okay, I'd be dead right now if this was the case. And then people are doing such great work and find out that, all viruses, no one has isolated a virus. Nobody has isolated a virus. Are you kidding me? I can't call and get get any kind of virus in a test tube.
We mixed it with a monkey kidney cell and a bunch of shit in a tube, and then we definitely know that gunk made it sick. So yeah, viruses, bro. Come on, get with it.
Yeah, but no, I mean, it all has come out. And then they just want to give us shots and scare us, say, oh, you can't get measles. Well, why not? Why can't I get measles? Isn't it my choice if I want to get it or not? Anyway.
You know what? Actually, God got it wrong. We made a shot that's going to bypass all of your defenses for anything like this. It's definitely safe. We're going to encapsulate it in a plant membrane so that it'll shrink your body further into accepting this definitely alien thing that you definitely need into your definitely capable immune system. Sound good?
Yep. That
sounds retarded. What the
fuck? No. That is what we believe in full. We subscribe to exactly what you laid out before you called it. Right. You called it that, and this is not medical advice, and yep.
One step
too far. Sorry. This is not medical advice. This is, just take your vitamins.
Yeah, that was facetious, and I believe in all the mainstream media. So
Yeah.
Hey, I have
Where do
a
I
question
sign
on
up
the.
to get one of those things that Shane was talking about?
I think there's packages coming out for free or whatever.
Oh, nice. I could just get one
We
from
knew
Amazon.
it was safe and effective before it was even conceived.
That's how you know it's safe, dude.
Yep. Yep. All right, everyone. Thank you so much.
That
Hey,
was
can I
great.
ask you one more question before you go, if that's okay?
Sure.
Hey, I was just wondering something that you said was pretty profound. You said the eclipse that we just had seems to be the same one as year 0 or something to that effect. How do we calculate that out? Is that off of like a 13-month lunar cycle, or
Well,
what is
Dimbleby.
like I guess
Okay.
the argument for that?
Real quick. There's a 651 year cycle of eclipses, and that is made by two halves, a 325 year half and a 326 year half. Okay. Each half has 18 cycles in it for a total of 36 cycles. Okay. Those 36 cycles cover all the constellations. So each cycle of 18 years has to go through 36 constellations. That 18-year cycle that has to happen 36 times is made up of 18 lines of teams of eclipses, 70 eclipses in total. Is it vary just a little bit? It does, but it is dependable 70 eclipses. And those repeat, cut and paste, spiraling through the 36 eclipses, right? I mean, 36 constellations. So this last one, April 8th, was number 1 of 70 eclipses. We know that.
Okay, I see. Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that.
That's number 1. In October, we're going to have number 2. And then we're going to have a lunar, which will be number 3. And we'll have another full solar eclipse or an annular eclipse. And that will be number 4. And then next year, we're going to have the second team, and we know exactly what those are. And that will be, I can tell you right now, that will be number 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I know that 9 is always a partial solar eclipse. Number 9 is always a partial solar eclipse. And then you go to year 3, and that will have number 10, 11, 12, and 13, which will be a partial solar eclipse, a total lunar eclipse, a solar eclipse, and a partial lunar eclipse. 13 is always a partial lunar eclipse, always. And you can cut and paste that every 18 years. Now, the path that it takes, where it's at, because the day that it happens is going to be 18 years, 10, 11 days. And so it won't come back to the same day on the calendar until it goes through 651 years. And then you'll have the exact same day.
That's a nice way to explain it. I like that.
Right? And you can follow that exact same day of April 8th being, because right now we're in the 10th year of the 36 cycles, right? You have to have 36 18 years. We're in the 10th. We just began it. This is number 1. Number 1, first year, first eclipse of year 1 in 18 years.
Essentially, because Dimbleby did all the chronology and then equated them to the periodicity and then figured it out up to his time, which was like roughly 100 years ago. And he concluded that was the conclusion of a great cycle. And then since then, we can calculate how far it is for us on the new cycle.
Right.
So that's
and you
right.
can go and use NASA, right? You can go and use NASA and go back and see what were the eclipses last year in 2023 And it will be a full solar eclipse, a partial lunar eclipse, a full solar eclipse, a partial lunar eclipse.
Yep. This cycle
Which
right here.
was year
perfect.
18. That's the 18 team, line 18 in the 18-year cycle. That was the conclusion of the 9th cycle in the 10th great astronomical year. So once you write it down a little bit, it takes a little, it took me weeks to, really understand it, because I just had to read it and read it and read it, reread it and plot it and all of that to understand what was being said here. But you can take that self same day, though, the self same day, and follow it backwards. And so we're in, I think, year 164 of 651 years, right?
Yep.
So, right, that's year number 1 in a new 18-year cycle. So I can go back to 1860, I believe it's 1860, and that's the beginning of our 651-year cycle.
Right.
So 1860, and then just copy and paste those same days back through history, and I've got timestamps. And with those timestamps, I can overlay that with the solar cycle, the lunar cycle, the transits of Venus and Mercury. I can overlay it with documentation from the Egyptians, history, and Chaldeans, and the biblical and Chinese history. I can overlay all of that, and it all lines up to 1722. That's a huge time marker. 1656, that's a huge time marker. And then it goes back, and they all start new on same days on the prime date creation. And that's why I call it Adam's eclipse.
The very first eclipse, because it always repeats in the cycles. Once the stars come all the way back around, of course, the sun and the moon repeat their dance, because what else could they possibly do? Kepler pointed it out, Newton fucked it up, and here we are.
From the
And you can just cut and paste, and we have the technology to do that today, to put in these numbers, and you can cut and paste them back, right?
We have the bread and
And
butter technology, cut and paste.
yeah, cut and paste it backwards. And, all these lines, Dimbleby called them astronomical lines of measurement. And they, have these timestamps, and then they have these time markers. And the markers are these big ones, right? That really, what we can wrap our head around. I can wrap my head around 651 cycles more than I can 36 times 18 times, so yeah, I hope that helps.
from the
Yeah,
perspective of
that helped a lot. Thank you. That was I put it in a much easier, digestible way to understand it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
from the perspective of a musician, it's polyrhythms. It's all polyrhythmic. It's like you can kind of call it just a big, giant set of heavenly polyrhythms that just keep repeating. What that means is just like you have different time signatures, and things will start to sound disjointed and kind of go out of sync, and then they'll come back into sync, and they'll for like those 2 or 3 beats, they'll sound like they were just, like they were always in sync, and then they'll kind of slowly go back out of sync, and then, but with this, you have that on multiple layers.
Harmonic frequencies dynamically scaled. How about that?
Right. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, because absolutely this is all about music, about sound. The stars make sound. We have our octaves, right? Everything is about the sounds of these frequencies, and they've messed, and I think Shane can tell you a little bit more about that, how they've messed with the frequencies to mess with us, right? To mess with our bodies, because we're at these certain frequencies, these musical frequencies. And instead of, talking about evolution, why don't we talk about the electromagnetic and also these frequencies of music, because a lot of these like let's say the St. Michael's ley line, which absolutely is a path of an eclipse, right?
I mean,
Um,
let's talk about buildings made in the frequency
yeah,
patterns of sound waves, guys. What the hell
right.
is that? Everywhere.
So
Oh, whatever.
into Santiago de Compostela, right? You do this big long pilgrimage and you wind up at this cathedral and you're next to dead because you've just had this long pilgrimage for 5,000 miles, and you're in this and you're you have the sound of these pipes, these frequencies of these pipes to make you feel better, and then of course the incense and all this stuff that they do. It's amazing. And then you have all these old buildings. It's all about frequency.
It's all fake and gay
It's all
unless
about
it's
music.
frequency.
Yeah. And I think, to me, and I'm not a musician, but I think that they align with the frequencies of the stars and the sun and the moon, and because we know that they all have a sound, right?
Interestingly, whenever you have the sun and the moon and the dynamic intercedence with their overlay, which causes the dynamic system, you have, say, in tides, I would say the double hula hooping, semi-diurnal inter-oscillation predictive harmonic tides, right? That's in the form of a frequency. That's how they use that and express it. You have the lunar periodicities within itself mirroring, and of course the specific months of the, the apogee, the perigee, the specific part
Right.
where it passes the note,
And,
all those symmetries, of course, coming back to
and
geometry. It's beautiful.
these big greenhouses that they would build, right? They would put pipe organs in them, right? They would put pipe organs in them to play because all of these plants that they had in their greenhouses would grow so much better with these frequencies of the pipe organ. And of course, my husband plays the bagpipes, and it's, we're out in Ireland and he's playing the bagpipes, and guess who comes running? All the cows and the sheep, It's like,
Sheeple.
you play a few notes on the bagpipes and they come running. It's just amazing, So it's all about music and sound and frequencies and in cooperation with emotions.
Try this thing. It's so easy to repeat. Just take 2 cups of water and play music on 432 hertz on one of them, and you try to put them in the freezer. Yeah, the one which you played music on, you will have that clear, crystal clear glass ice. And the other one will you can use just tap water, and the other one will be just like foggy in the inside. It won't be just like that clear crystal clear ice.
Wow.
Man, I overloaded
I
the chat.
totally believe that because of who was that Japanese that did with the water.
Masaru Emoto.
I know.
Yeah,
It's
that was
Masaru Emoto.
amazing. Yeah. Oh geez, I need to play music over my water.
You need to think at it or whatever. Be positive.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I can't disprove it. And like,
And
like,
it's so fascinating when I see how the ancient Indians understood those things, and
yeah.
they have those prayers where they use that thing, so they can use just their mouth and they can make those specific sounds like the and other notes by their mouth, or they use those balls that they made in specific thickness and specific size to have that specific note.
Yes, like the
buildings
big bells, right?
around
Like the bells.
the frequency, the cymatic patternization of a sound is literally a physical manifestation, a 2D slice of a 3D moving toroidal field. And lo and behold, they built buildings in these shapes all over the world, always next to water for reasons or whatever.
Yeah.
Who
And
knows?
that's why we have these patterns, because like Venus, it must be a sound
Right?
that creates it's
Same
pattern,
pattern. Yes.
right? And like a rose, like the way a tree grows, or fruit. You know, we
Toroid of
have
field.
all of these
Mhm.
sound patterns, cymatic patterns everywhere we look. You know, we cut into a tomato or an apple or whatever. It's right there, and it's just really fascinating.
And just about those balls that they make, and they can produce a specific frequency. Each ball can produce a specific frequency. I can't imagine that those people just try to hear the sound from the ball, and they said, "Oh, that frequency," just by using their ears without using instrument that can help them distinguish the frequencies and get to that specific one. And that time they will say, "Yeah, we got the frequency. That ball is good," and they go to the other one. I don't think that they just use their ears to listen to the ball and say, "Oh, it's that specific frequency that we were searching for."
I mean, just go and speculate wildly and be like, oh, well, they use all sorts of charge potential, taking advantage of energy from nothing, and understood how capacitance of water with other fundamental shit, and using capacitance sound frequency to literally have, all the bodies of water store the charge that they would use intermittently for the non-wired stuff. Or I don't know. I have no idea.
And even sound is in order, right? Even sound is in an order, so it's not random. And they try to tell us that sound can be random, but it's not.
Sound, frequency, and vibration govern the world, smart people said, or whatever. Something like that.
Perfect. Perfect. Thanks, everybody. And
Nice.
hope to talk to y'all soon.
You should pop in whenever you see us, although it's kind of intermittent as opposed to a regular thing. But we're here.
Definitely, I need to use Discord. Definitely. Talk to y'all later.
Thank you.
Peace. Thanks for coming by.
Yeah, we'll see you.
Bye-bye.
I'm going to go ahead and close out the stream here on Ether Cosmology. Again, thanks to Patricia for coming out. Anyone else want to throw in anything really quick before I wrap up? Is there anything pressing?
Read that dude. What's his name? Fucking dude, I got a Pachinko or whatever. Someone say it.
Ola
Flamenco.
Jeffaminko or
There you go. Jeffaminko.
It's less effective, but I can't say it once. But I'm gonna read that dude. Read the books. They're in every chat. Download them. Let's go.
Cool.
Nice.
And we'll see you guys tomorrow night for reading night. Take care, y'all.